Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are going to take a fully spoilerly look at Kaiju number 8, chapter 62. There was just something so terribly wholesome about this chapter. I mean, even more so than the others even. There was a theme, there was a moral to the story. However, this is one of Matsumoto's stories we are talking about. Matsumoto doesn't just shove a moral into the story. He tells a good story. He makes a story that is a true reflection of reality, and because of this, morals naturally grow out of them, so in such a way that the morals themselves are barely noticeable. The first 4 times I read this chapter, all I saw was a good story, a story that was so standard that I wondered how it could be so good. Our boys are struggling, our boys are achieving their goals, or not, as the story demands, but the story felt good, wholesome. There was something in this chapter, something that soothed the fears of previous chapters, in the same way that Reno's inappropriate outbursts soothed our hearts way back when Kafka was being loaded into that truck in handcuffs. Back then, the theme was loyalty. Now the theme is steadfastness. Our grandmothers expressed it in the words, "Those who wait also serve." But the theme was first expressed as part of one of Milton's poems. Now, you may or may not have heard of Milton, but you may probably have heard of one of his more famous works, Paradise Lost, even if you've never read it. But here's the backstory. Milton was a poet who wrote for a living way back in the 1700s. He earned his bread by writing, so when he began to go blind in the middle of his life, he was understandably traumatized. He didn't just write to feed himself, you see. He considered his art a divine calling. His poems were how he served God and his fellow human brothers. He struggled with his sense of helplessness and failure until finally finding peace with the idea that he was waiting, patiently preparing himself for his next task. He expressed himself in a new poem that ended thus. Thousands at his bidding speed and pass o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. So Milton waited and served and prepared himself. Then he was able to write one of the defining poems of the world that would challenge and change literature for generations. Not writing it down himself, but depending on the work and loyalty of his secretaries who wrote to his dictation. Now, does this theme sound at all familiar? Does this sound a little like what our boys Iharu and Reno have been going through? Of course it does. And it's no coincidence. Milton wrote that poem nearly 4 centuries ago in response to the reality that he experienced. Matsumoto is creating a great manga for us by showing us that same reality that still exists. Our bodies fail us, and we have to rely on those around us. It's something that every human must experience at some point in their lives, even if, especially if, we've been granted some gift above and beyond what people are normally given. We still depend on everybody around us, and we need to remember that. I mean, this is so beautiful. Now, we will be getting into all the spoilers now, so to give you a chance to click away, I will give you a chance to go check out the links below the video to get a copy of one of my books. If you want to laugh, go check out the Humans Are Weird series, short stories of human absurdity. If you are looking to break your heart, you can go check out Dying Embers, Dragons, Aliens, and Things Who Go Boom in the Night. So, you have been warned. On to the spoilers. Now, Matsumoto has been building up to this moment from the very beginning. What moment, you ask? The moment where Iharu breaks through the literal barriers of the ice wall that Reno has put up, and the no less real but more metaphorical barriers of his own pride and hubris to extend his hand to Reno. This is what the chapter was building up to. Every blow from the kaiju, every drop of information we were fed by the captain of the 4th Division, every agonizing panel where we see Reno destroying his body was leading up to this moment. But there was so much more. We have Kafka at the very beginning of the story trying to find fulfillment in just being a member of a kaiju cleanup crew, knowing in his head that the work he was doing was important. We've seen how much he inspired his crewmates on the cleanup crew with his humble attitude and his dedication to duty. But he wasn't happy, he wasn't satisfied. Then we saw Reno come in, arrogant and cocky, derisive of anyone who gave up on their dreams. Then we got introduced to Iharu, who was even more arrogant than Reno. All three of them are striving for that goal, for that position of glory to one degree or another. Then, one by one, they have to find their place in supporting roles. For Reno, it's easier at first, probably because he had Kafka's example. First in the application arc, where Reno and Kafka decide that their low scores mean they will have to provide backup, and they begin to do well in that role, using their minds and leaving the active work to others. Meanwhile, Iharu is out there showing off and flexing his power. Then we get to see Kafka making himself useful in battle with the fungal kaiju, where his knowledge and his sense of duty allow him to contribute more to the battle than anyone except for possibly Mina herself. Then there's that theme again. Those who wait also serve. Kafka waited. He waited for a decade and a half to join the defense force, quietly training his mind and spirit. He waited to be useful by studying in the library while his brother officers slept. He waited patiently in captivity to prove his humanity. See, waiting isn't just sitting around doing nothing. Waiting is actively preparing yourself, doing whatever little thing you can do to be ready for that moment. Kafka is the embodiment of this idea of the necessity of patient waiting, true waiting. But then Kafka was snatched away from Reno and Iharu, and they, more importantly Reno, no longer had his presence and an example and a leader. Then Reno overtakes Iharu, and Iharu begins to be faced with his own inadequacy to achieve the goal that he's had so clearly formed in his mind, that goal he yearns after, that goal that is his childhood dream. Reno was charging ahead blindly, trying to be the one who could protect Kafka and Iharu and the rest of his friends. When Kafka was there with him, Reno was calm and level-headed, pushing himself to grow, but never pushing himself too far. Perhaps keeping Kafka's driving spirit in a healthy balance also kept Reno's naturally pushing spirit in check as well. But without Kafka, Reno is literally pushing himself past his limits. In this chapter, we see his brain scream, his muscles tear, and his bones break. There's no Kafka there to balance Reno out. And then Iharu steps up. Iharu, who is the most impatient, the most arrogant. Iharu, who's also been serving his waiting time. Iharu had that dream of being the big hero like Mina, out there on the battlefield, blasting away at the Kaiju. But just like Milton a quarter of a millennium ago, he was forced by his physical limitations to stand and wait. He couldn't progress towards that goal, but he just wasn't just sitting around. He was training. He was preparing. He was waiting. And well, now he doesn't get to be the big hero, the one with the gun standing out there on the field. He doesn't get to achieve that bright, shining goal that was his childish dream. What he does get to do is reach out his hand to his friend and pull him back out of the very bowels of the fresh new hell that Reno has crafted for himself. Iharu stood and waited, not lazing around, but preparing himself for this, just like Milton did. Just like Milton, there is nothing that Iharu can do on his own, but there is something that he can do with help. Or rather, it's kind of a split metaphor. Iharu is the secretaries to Reno's blind Milton. There is just so much in this chapter, the culmination of so many different stories. Reno's drive, Kafka's humility, Iharu's arrogance. Yet, while there are culminations, there are also beginnings of new stories. You are left desperate to know what happens from here. Will Iharu ever gain the power of his own that he wants so badly? Will he find peace and a new goal in being the Hoshina to Reno's Mina? Where is the story going? Then we get to focus on Reno's specific regrets for the series, and these are very, very interesting. You know, if you're already obsessed with the idea that Reno might be some sort of kaiju plant, that he's not just serving his own goals, because the moments that cause him the regret for not being able to protect people are remarkably logical in context of the story. They are moments where he was looking on helpless. But if you are already suspicious, they are the moment that Kafka was arrested by the defense force and taken away from Reno, and the moment that Iharu protected Reno from Kaiju number 9. The Iharu moment does make perfect sense, but that first one, well, I'll do a whole video on these two moments later, but my takeaway is this. this. Reno, in these memories where he feels the most helpless, is seeing the Kaiju Defense Force as a threat that he failed to protect Kafka from, not Kaiju number 10 or the Yoju bomb, as if Reno was somehow separate from the Defense Force and considering them the other instead of considering the Kaiju the other. And this is a chapter that overall gave me the feeling that Reno was less sus than before. I just adore how Matsumoto writes. So, what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Does this chapter leave you more or less sus of Reno? Where do you think Haru is going? I'd love to hear your ideas in the comments below the video. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans are weird. We took a vote, and humans are weird. I have the data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.